Stop recording right now.
Stop recording right now, I said stop. The words cut through the humid August air like a blade. Officer Derek Mallory's hand was already moving toward his belt, fingers dancing near the handcuffs as he closed the distance between himself and 17-year-old Marcus Webb. The phone in Marcus's steady hand didn't waver, its camera lens capturing every word, every movement, every twitch of anger crossing the officer's reddening face. "You're under arrest for obstruction of justice." The crowd that had gathered on the corner of Madison and Fifth gasped collectively. Phones appeared like fireflies at dusk, a dozen more cameras now trained on the scene. Marcus stood on the public sidewalk, a full 15 feet from where Officer Mallory had pulled over a silver Honda Civic, where a young black woman sat trembling in the driver's seat, tears streaming down her face as another officer searched her vehicle. Marcus's voice was calm, measured. "I'm on public property, sir. I have the right to film." Officer Mallory's jaw clenched so tight the muscles bulged visibly. His partner, Officer James Chen, looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot as he glanced between the growing crowd and his colleague. The late afternoon sun beat down on the cracked sidewalk, making the air shimmer with heat and tension. "You're interfering with police business," Mallory barked, now close enough that Marcus could smell the coffee on his breath mixed with something sharper. Anger, maybe fear. Marcus didn't lower his phone. Behind him, someone in the crowd called out, "He's not doing anything wrong." Another voice joined, "Leave that boy alone." The chorus of support grew, but so did the danger crackling in the air like electricity before a storm. "Turn around, hands behind your back." Where are you from? Tell us in the comments below. And if you're loving this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more. 6 months earlier, Marcus Webb had been a different person. Not in the ways that mattered most. He'd always been observant, always been the one to notice what others missed, always possessed that quiet intensity that made adults simultaneously impressed and uncomfortable. But 6 months ago, he'd been planning for college applications, worrying about his SAT scores, thinking his biggest challenge would be choosing between Howard University and Morehouse College. Then came the night that changed everything. Marcus had been walking home from his job at the community center, cutting through Riverside Park as he always did, when he'd witnessed something that would alter the trajectory of his entire life. 2 police officers, their faces illuminated by the harsh fluorescent lights of the parking lot, stood over a man on his knees. Marcus had frozen behind a cluster of trees, his body understanding the danger before his mind caught up. The man on his knees was crying, begging. He was unarmed, his hands zip-tied behind his back. And what happened next, what Marcus watched with growing horror, was something that would haunt his dreams for months to come. Marcus had filmed it all on his phone, shaking hands, rapid breathing, but he'd filmed it. And when he'd gone to the police station the next day with his mother, Detective Sarah Martinez, he'd remember her name forever. He'd been terrified, but she'd been different. She'd listened. She'd looked at the video with eyes that reflected his own horror, and she'd told him something that would become the most important secret of his young life. "This is bigger than you know," she'd said softly. "The officers in your video are part of an investigation, a federal investigation. The Department of Justice has been building a case against corruption in this department for 2 years." Marcus's mother, Patricia Webb, had gripped his hand so tight it hurt. Her son. Her careful, brilliant son who wanted to be a civil rights attorney, who carried his grandfather's law books in his backpack like talismans, who believed in justice even when the world gave him every reason not to. "We need your testimony," Detective Martinez had continued. "But Marcus, you need to understand something. This is dangerous. The officers you filmed, the ones connected to this case, they're powerful. They're protected by other cops, by the union, by people in positions of authority. If word gets out that you're our witness." She hadn't finished the sentence. She hadn't needed to. For 6 months, Marcus had carried that weight. He'd attended depositions in unmarked buildings downtown, had spoken to federal prosecutors in rooms with no windows, had memorized the faces of corrupt officers he was helping to bring down. The DOJ had promised protection, had assigned him a handler, Agent Timothy Reeves, who checked in weekly, who'd given Marcus a direct number to call if anything ever felt wrong. Marcus's best friend, Jamal, knew something was different, but not what. His girlfriend, Destiny, sensed the distance but attributed it to college stress. His little sister, Imani, who was 13 and terrifyingly perceptive, had asked him point-blank one night, "Are you in trouble?" Marcus had lied to her face, something that still made his chest ache. His father had died when Marcus was 12. A heart attack at 43, stress and hypertension, and a medical system that hadn't taken his pain seriously. His grandfather, Reverend William Webb, was the family patriarch now, a pillar of the community who'd marched with John Lewis, who'd been arrested 7 times during the civil rights movement, who preached every Sunday about standing up for what's right even when it costs you everything. Marcus had inherited his grandfather's steel spine and his father's analytical mind. From his mother, he'd gotten the ability to stay calm in chaos, to think 3 steps ahead, to survive. But standing on that street corner on August 15th, with Officer Derek Mallory's hands gripping his arms, Marcus felt that calm beginning to crack. As the handcuffs clicked around Marcus's wrists, he caught a glimpse of the officer's badge number 714. His blood ran cold. He'd seen that number before in federal documents on lists of officers under investigation. Officer Mallory wasn't just any cop. He was one of them. The metal bit into Marcus's wrists with familiar cruelty. Familiar because he'd seen it happen to others. Familiar because it was a pain that echoed through generations. Familiar because in America, if you were young and black and male, the feeling of handcuffs was something you prepared for even if you'd done nothing wrong. "What's your name?" Officer Mallory demanded, though Marcus could see his partner had already run the ID check. The information was right there on whatever screen Chen was staring at with increasing concern. "Marcus Webb," he answered clearly, knowing the crowd was still filming, knowing every word mattered. "Marcus Webb," Mallory repeated, his tone dripping with mockery. "Well, Marcus Webb, you just earned yourself a ride downtown. Obstruction of justice, interfering with a police investigation, and let's add resisting arrest for good measure." "I didn't resist anything," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. His phone had clattered to the sidewalk when Mallory grabbed him, and he'd watched an older woman, Mrs. Chen from the community center, quickly scoop it up, holding it close to her chest like she was protecting something precious. Officer Chen finally spoke up. "Derek, maybe we should just—" "Stay out of this," Mallory snapped. Then to Marcus, "You think you're smart? Think you're some kind of activist? You kids with your phones, thinking you're journalists or something. You don't know what real police work looks like." The young woman from the Honda Civic, her name was Aaliyah Richardson, Marcus would later learn had gotten out of her vehicle, her hands still shaking. "What did I do wrong?" she kept asking. "I used my turn signal. My registration is current. What did I do wrong?" "Get back in the vehicle," Mallory shouted at her, not even turning to look. His full attention was on Marcus now, and there was something in his eyes that went beyond professional annoyance. It was personal. It was rage looking for a target. The crowd had grown to maybe 30 people now. Marcus recognized faces from the neighborhood, Mr. Washington who ran the corner store, the Patterson twins who were home from college, old Mrs. Alois who'd taught Sunday school for 40 years. They were witnesses, all of them, their phones held high, and Marcus felt a strange mixture of gratitude and fear. Grateful they were there, afraid of what might happen to them too. "You all need to disperse," Mallory announced to the crowd, his voice booming with authority that teetered on the edge of hysteria. "This is an active police investigation. Anyone who doesn't leave will be arrested for obstruction." Nobody moved. "This is a public street," Mr. Washington called out, his voice gravelly from decades of smoking but strong with conviction. "These kids got a right to be here. We got a right to witness." Mallory's hand moved to his radio. "We need backup at Madison and 5th. Large crowd forming, possible riot situation." The word riot sent a chill through Marcus's body. He knew what happened when police claimed riots. He knew how quickly peaceful observers became aggressive mobs in police reports, how video footage could be edited, how narratives could be spun. Mrs. Alois stepped forward, her elderly frame surprisingly steady. "Officer," she said, her voice carrying the weight of 7 decades of life, that boy was standing still on a sidewalk. "We all saw it. There's no riot here. There's just you making a mistake that's going to cost you." Mallory wheeled on her. "You threatening a police officer, ma'am." "I'm informing you," she responded coolly. "There's a difference. I'm also informing you that I'm a retired federal employee. I know my rights, and I know his rights. And what you're doing right now is a violation of both." Marcus felt Mallory's grip tighten on his arm, hard enough to bruise. The officer leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper that only Marcus could hear. "You think you're protected? You think these people with their phones matter? You're nobody, you're nothing. And by the time I'm done with you, everyone's going to know it." But Marcus knew something Mallory didn't. Something that made his heart pound not just with fear, but with grim anticipation. The badge number 714 belonged to an officer who was 3 weeks away from indictment. The federal case was almost complete, and Marcus wasn't just a random teenager filming a traffic stop. He was the witness who'd started it all. As Mallory shoved Marcus toward the patrol car, his phone, still in Mrs. Chen's protective grip, began to ring. The name on the screen was visible to everyone nearby: Agent Reeves DOJ, the federal handler, the cavalry. But would they arrive before Mallory did something irreversible? The back of a police cruiser smells like desperation and disinfectant, Marcus thought as Mallory shoved him into the seat with unnecessary force. The partition between front and back was scratched plexiglass, cloudy with age and violence, offering only a distorted view of the officers climbing into the front seats. Chen was driving, Mallory rode passenger, and the tension between them was palpable even through the barrier. Marcus could see Chen's jaw working, could see him glancing at his partner with something that looked like concern or maybe fear. His wrists ached where the cuffs dug in. Marcus shifted, trying to find a position that didn't cut off circulation, and caught Mallory's eyes in the rearview mirror. The officer was smiling, but it was the kind of smile that made Marcus's survival instincts scream. Outside, the crowd hadn't dispersed. If anything, it had grown larger. Marcus could see people making calls, see the social media warriors at work, see the neighborhood network activating the way it always did when one of their own was in danger. This was how communities survived: by watching, by recording, by refusing to look away. Mrs. Chen was still holding his phone, and Marcus watched as she handed it to Mrs. Alois, who in turn passed it to Mr. Washington. They were protecting the evidence. They understood what Marcus had captured wasn't just footage of a traffic stop. It was documentation of a civil rights violation in real time. Mallory's radio crackled to life. "Unit 47, what's your status?" En route to station with one in custody, Mallory responded, his voice professional now, all the rage carefully locked away. His transformation was remarkable and terrifying. This was a man who knew how to perform for an audience, who understood that the real abuse happened in the spaces between witnesses, in the gaps where cameras couldn't reach. "Copy that. Be advised, we've received multiple calls about the incident at Madison and 5th. Media is en route." Marcus saw Mallory's hand clench into a fist. They drove through Marcus's neighborhood, past streets he'd walked his entire life. Past the basketball court where he'd learned to shoot, past the library where Ms. Rodriguez had taught him to love reading, past the church where his grandfather preached every Sunday. Each landmark felt significant now, like he was cataloging them for a last time, and he hated himself for thinking that way. Chen broke the silence. "Derek, the kid was on public property. You saw the distance. He wasn't interfering." "He was creating a hostile environment," Mallory shot back, "undermining our authority in front of suspects and civilians." "He was filming, that's legal. Not when it interferes with an investigation." "What investigation?" Chen's voice rose slightly. "That was a routine traffic stop for a broken tail light." Marcus's mind raced. A broken tail light, the oldest excuse in the book. Aaliyah Richardson's Honda had been immaculate. He'd noticed it immediately, the way he noticed everything now. There was no broken tail light. It was a pretext stop, the kind that filled federal discrimination lawsuits, the kind that destroyed trust between police and communities, the kind that sometimes ended in death. His phone had captured the car, had captured the intact taillight, had captured Mallory's lie. The cruiser pulled into the station parking lot, a concrete fortress that Marcus had visited 3 times before, twice with his mother and his lawyer, once for the deposition that had lasted 7 hours. He knew this building. He knew where the interrogation rooms were, where the holding cells were, where the cameras had blind spots. But most importantly, he knew that somewhere in this building was Detective Sarah Martinez, the woman who'd started all of this, the officer who'd chosen justice over the blue wall of silence. Mallory yanked Marcus out of the car with the same unnecessary force, parading him past a group of officers standing near the entrance. Some looked away. Some watched with expressions Marcus couldn't read. One, a young black officer Marcus didn't recognize, met his eyes and gave the smallest shake of his head, a gesture that could have meant anything. Warning, sympathy, solidarity, or maybe just pity. They walked through the main entrance and Marcus counted cameras. 6 visible ones in the lobby alone. Everything was being recorded. Everything would be documented. The thought brought small comfort. Mallory steered him toward the processing desk, where a heavy-set sergeant with tired eyes looked up from his paperwork. The nameplate read Sergeant William Kowalski, and Marcus recognized the name immediately. Not from the federal investigation. Kowalski wasn't one of the corrupt ones, but from newspaper articles, community meetings. Kowalski was old school, 28 years on the force, and according to Detective Martinez, he was one of the good ones, one of the few. "What have we got?" Kowalski asked, his eyes flicking from Mallory to Marcus and back again. "Obstruction of justice, interfering with police investigation, resisting arrest," Mallory recited like a grocery list. Kowalski's gaze settled on Marcus, really seeing him now. "How old are you, son?" 17, sir." Kowalski's expression shifted, hardened. "Where are his parents? You read him his rights." The question landed like a bomb. Marcus saw Mallory's face flush. "He's being processed now," Mallory deflected. "We'll contact parents after booking." "No," Kowalski said flatly. "You'll contact parents now. He's a minor. You know the procedures, Officer Mallory." The use of his rank instead of his first name was significant. Marcus saw it register on Mallory's face, saw the calculation happening behind his eyes. Before Mallory could respond, the station's front doors burst open. A woman in a sharp black suit strode in, FBI credentials already in her hand, her heels clicking against the linoleum like gunshots. Behind her, 2 more federal agents in tactical gear. And behind them, the news cameras Marcus had been told were coming. Agent Jessica Morrison had arrived, and she looked like someone ready for war. But was she there for Marcus, or was she there for something even bigger? The lobby of the police station transformed in seconds. What had been a routine evening of processing and paperwork became something else entirely. A stage where power dynamics shifted like tectonic plates, grinding against each other with devastating force. Agent Jessica Morrison was tall, maybe 5'11", with skin the color of polished mahogany and eyes that missed nothing. Marcus had met her once during his depositions, had sat across from her in a federal building while she'd explained what his testimony would mean, what it could cost, what it might change. "I'm Special Agent Morrison with the Federal Bureau of Investigation," she announced, her voice carrying across the lobby with the kind of authority that made everyone freeze. "I'm here regarding Marcus Webb." Sergeant Kowalski stood up slowly. "Agent Morrison, what's the FBI's interest in a local obstruction case?" "The FBI's interest is extensive, Sergeant, and I'll be happy to discuss it with you and your captain in private. But first, I need to see Mr. Webb." Mallory hadn't moved. His hand was still gripping Marcus's arm, and Marcus could feel the tremor running through the officer's fingers. Fear or rage or both, it didn't matter. What mattered was that Mallory was a trapped animal now, and trapped animals were dangerous. "This is an active arrest," Mallory said, his voice tight. "You have no jurisdiction over local law enforcement matters." Morrison's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. "Officer Mallory. Badge number 714. 12 years on the force, 8 commendations," and she paused for effect, pulling out a tablet and scrolling through it with deliberate slowness. "Currently under federal investigation for civil rights violations, excessive force, falsifying police reports, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus watched the color drain from Mallory's face, watched his grip on Marcus's arm go slack, watched the reality of his situation crystallize in his eyes. Around them, other officers had stopped pretending to work. Some looked shocked, some looked knowing, and some, Marcus counted 3, looked terrified. "Release Mr. Webb immediately," Morrison commanded. "The handcuffs, now." Mallory's hands fumbled with his keys. When the cuffs came off, Marcus felt the rush of blood returning to his hands, felt the ache of constriction releasing, felt something else too, power shifting, justice arriving, the moment he'd been waiting for and dreading in equal measure. Chen stepped forward. "Agent Morrison, I was the arresting officer's partner. I need to state for the record that I expressed concerns about." "Save it for your deposition, Officer Chen," Morrison interrupted, but her tone was less harsh. "You'll have your chance to tell your side." She turned to Kowalski. "I need a private room. I need Marcus's personal belongings returned, including his phone. And I need someone to call his mother and inform her that he's safe and under federal protection." "Federal protection?" Mallory's voice cracked on the words. "He's just some kid who was." The doors burst open again, and this time it was the news crews. Channel 7, Channel 4, the local independent station, and someone with equipment that looked like national network grade. They flooded in like a tide, and with them came questions rapid fire and overlapping. Is it true there's a federal investigation? Are officers being arrested tonight? Is this connected to the DOJ probe announced last month? Sergeant Kowalski moved fast for a man his size, positioning himself between the cameras and Marcus. "No comment at this time. This is an active investigation. I'm going to need all media personnel to exit the building immediately." But Morrison held up one hand. "Actually, I'll make a brief statement." She waited for the cameras to focus on her, for the microphones to cluster. At approximately 5:47 p.m. today, a minor who is a protected federal witness in an ongoing Department of Justice investigation was unlawfully detained by officers of this department. The witness was exercising his constitutionally protected right to film police activity in a public space when he was arrested on false charges. The FBI, in coordination with the DOJ, has been monitoring this situation, and several others like it, as part of a larger investigation into systematic civil rights violations within this department. The questions exploded like fireworks. How many officers are under investigation? How long has this been going on? Was this a setup to catch corrupt cops? Morrison ignored them all, turning instead to Sergeant Kowalski. "Captain's office. Now, I have a federal warrant I need to execute, and we're running out of time." Marcus stood at the center of the chaos, feeling oddly disconnected from his body. This was happening. This was really happening. The secret he'd carried for 6 months was detonating in real time, and he was ground zero. Mrs. Chen appeared at the entrance, still clutching his phone. She'd followed them to the station, this grandmother who ran the after-school program where Marcus volunteered, and she pushed through the crowd with the determination of someone who'd survived too much to be intimidated by cameras and federal agents. "This belongs to him," she said, holding out the phone to Morrison. "Thank you, ma'am," Morrison said, taking it carefully. "What's your name?" "Linda Chen. I witnessed the entire arrest. I have footage, and I want to testify." Morrison's eyes lit up. "We'll be in touch, Ms. Chen, but right now I need you to go home and keep that footage safe. Cloud backup if you can, don't delete anything." Marcus found his voice finally. "My mom, I need to call my." "Already done," Morrison said gently. "Agent Reeves called her the moment your phone triggered the alert. She's on her way. She'll be here in 10 minutes. "What alert?" Mallory's question came out desperate, confused. Morrison looked at him with something close to pity. "The alert that triggers when a protected federal witness is detained by law enforcement. We've had eyes on Marcus Webb for 6 months. Every federal prosecutor, every agent assigned to this case, and every supervisor up to, and including the director of the FBI gets notified when something happens to him." She checked her watch. "By my count, you've been breaking federal law for approximately 43 minutes now, Officer Mallory." and every second of it has been documented. Behind them, 2 more agents entered. Marcus recognized one as Agent Reeves, his handler, the man who'd coached him through depositions and told him to stay calm, to stay smart, to trust the process. Reeves's face was grim. "We've got a situation developing outside. Crowds grown to over 200 people. Some of them are from activist groups. Some are local residents. But Jess," he looked at Morrison, "3 people in that crowd are wearing gear that IDs them as affiliated with the police union. And they're armed." Morrison's jaw clenched. She looked at Marcus, then at Kowalski, then back at Mallory, who'd gone pale as paper. "Get Marcus somewhere secure. Now, lock this building down." She pulled her weapon, checked it, and looked at Reeves with eyes that had seen too much. "The corruption runs deeper than we thought, and they know we're here to make arrests tonight. They're not going to let that happen quietly." As sirens began to wail outside and the crowd's roar grew louder, Marcus realized this wasn't just about his arrest anymore. It was about something much bigger and far more dangerous. The police station had become a fortress under siege. Though the enemy wasn't outside the walls, it was within them. Marcus sat in a small conference room on the 2nd floor, Agent Reeves standing guard at the door while Morrison coordinated with Sergeant Kowalski and 2 other officers whose faces Marcus didn't recognize but whose body language screamed federal. His mother still hadn't arrived, and that absence gnawed at him. 10 minutes had become 20, then 30. "Where is she?" Marcus asked, his voice tight. "You said 10 minutes. Reeves checked his phone, his expression darkening. "There's a situation at the perimeter. The crowd outside has blocked several streets. Your mother's car is 3 blocks away, but she can't get through." Through the conference room window, Marcus could see the chaos unfolding below. The crowd had swelled to hundreds now, a mix of community members, activists, and people Marcus suspected had come looking for confrontation rather than justice. Signs had appeared. "Black Lives Matter, Film the Police, Justice for MARCUSWEBB." His name, printed on cardboard and poster board, held high like a battle cry. Someone had called it in to the local Black Lives Matter chapter. Someone had live-streamed the arrest. And now the whole city was descending on this police station like a reckoning. Morrison entered the room, followed by a man in an expensive suit. Marcus recognized him as Assistant U.S. Attorney Leonard Chen, one of the federal prosecutors who'd spent hours preparing Marcus for what testifying would mean. "Marcus," Chen said, sitting across from him with the weariness of a man who'd been fighting this fight too long, "I need you to understand what's happening right now. The arrest tonight wasn't random. Officer Mallory has been under surveillance for 3 weeks. We've been waiting for him to make a mistake, waiting for something we could use to accelerate the timeline on our indictments." "You used me as bait," Marcus said flatly. Chen didn't flinch. "We protected you as bait. There's a difference. You were never in real danger. We had 6 agents within 2 blocks of that intersection. We had eyes on you the entire time." "He was in handcuffs," Reeves interjected, his voice hard. "He was in the back of Mallory's cruiser. You know what can happen in transit. You know how many people die in the back of police cars, in custody, in the spaces between witnesses." The tension in the room crackled like live wires. "We had no choice," Chen said. "Mallory and 14 other officers are part of a conspiracy that's been operating for at least 5 years. They've falsified reports, planted evidence, used excessive force, and covered for each other at every turn. They've created a system within the system, a gang with badges, and Marcus's testimony is the linchpin. Without him, without his video from 6 months ago, without his willingness to testify, the entire case falls apart." Marcus felt the weight of that settling on his shoulders. 14 officers, 14 families, 14 careers ending, and he was the one who'd started it. Morrison's radio crackled. "This is Captain Bradley. All available units, we have reports of armed individuals in the crowd. Tactical teams are mobilizing, requesting federal assistance." Morrison keyed her radio. "This is Special Agent Morrison, FBI. We have a protected witness in this facility. Federal jurisdiction takes precedence. I'm ordering a complete lockdown until we can safely extract our witness." A new voice came through, older, authoritative, dripping with barely contained hostility. "This is Union Representative Paul Stephenson." Agent Morrison, you're overstepping your authority. This is a local matter that's being blown out of proportion. Release the officers under investigation, and we can all sit down and talk this through properly. Marcus saw Morrison's jaw clench. Mr. Stephenson, this is a federal investigation involving multiple felony charges. Your union representation doesn't supersede federal law. The crowd outside had begun chanting now, the sound filtering through the walls like a heartbeat. Let him go, let him go, let him go. Reeves moved to the window, peering through the blinds. We've got a problem. I count at least 20 uniformed officers in that crowd who aren't on duty, and they're positioned in a way that's not random. They're organizing. Morrison joined him, cursing under her breath. They're planning something. She turned to Chen. How fast can you get a judge to issue arrest warrants for all 14 officers tonight? Chen was already pulling out his phone. Judge Harrington owes me a favor. Give me 20 minutes. We might not have 20 minutes, Morrison said. Marcus stood up. What happens to me? When this is over, when they're arrested, when I testify, what happens to me? The adults in the room exchanged glances. Witness protection if necessary, Chen said carefully. Relocation, new identity, but Marcus, that's a last resort. We're hopping. Hopping what? That the corrupt cops and their friends just accept defeat and let me go back to my regular life. Marcus heard his voice rising and didn't care. I'm 17. I'm supposed to apply to colleges in 3 months. I'm supposed to take my girlfriend to homecoming. I'm supposed to have a life. You will, Reeves said, and something in his tone made Marcus look at him sharply. You're a hero, Marcus. You did something most adults wouldn't have the courage to do. You saw something wrong and you reported it. You trusted the system even though the system has given you every reason not to trust it. And look where that got me, Marcus shot back. Trapped in a police station while a mob forms outside and corrupt cops plan whatever they're planning. A knock at the door silenced them all. Sergeant Kowalski entered, his face grave. Agent Morrison, we've got your warrant being fast-tracked. Judge Harrington is signing it now, but we've got another situation. Officer Mallory and 3 others have barricaded themselves in the locker room. They're refusing to come out. Morrison's expression went cold. Are they armed? Regulation sidearms, yes. Jesus, Reeves breathed. They're going to make a stand. Before Morrison could respond, the lights in the building flickered once, twice, then went out completely. Emergency generators kicked in, bathing everything in red. And through the sudden darkness came a voice over the building's PA system. Mallory's voice, amplified and desperate. Everyone needs to know the truth about Marcus Webb. This kid isn't a victim. He's part of a federal conspiracy to frame good cops, and I can prove it. As the words echoed through the station, Marcus felt his blood run cold. What proof could Mallory possibly have? What lie was he about to tell that might destroy everything? The emergency lighting turned the police station into something from a nightmare. All red shadows and harsh angles. Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs as Mallory's voice continued to boom through the PA system. 6 months ago, Marcus Webb and his associates planned and executed a setup. They targeted good officers, created false scenarios, manipulated footage, and tried to destroy careers. The footage he showed the DOJ? Edited. Doctored. A complete fabrication designed to launch a federal investigation and make himself a hero. No, Marcus whispered, that's not. I know, Morrison cut him off, her hand already on her radio. This is a desperate play. He's trying to turn the narrative, trying to make the crowd doubt. Don't give him the satisfaction of rattling you. But Mallory's accusations continued, each one more elaborate than the last. He painted a picture of Marcus as a young radical, radicalized by extremist groups, trained to bait police officers into confrontations, taught to edit video footage to make peaceful interactions look violent. It was masterful in its villainy, taking every conspiracy theory that existed about police reform activists and weaving them into a narrative that positioned Marcus as the villain. I have proof, Mallory announced. Text messages, communications with known agitators, evidence that Marcus Webb has been paid by activist organizations to target specific officers. And I have witnesses willing to testify that the video he provided to the DOJ was manipulated. Marcus watched the color drain from Chen's face. They can't have that. It's not possible. Unless they manufactured it, Reeves said grimly. Mallory's had 6 months to build a defense. What if he's been planning this the whole time? Morrison was already moving. I need to see Captain Bradley now. We need to access the locker room, get Mallory off that PA system, and contain this before. Her radio erupted with crosstalk, multiple voices overlapping, some panicked. Crowd is trying to breach the east entrance. Need backup on the second floor. Somebody cut the backup generators. We're running on battery. The building shuddered. An explosion. No, something ramming the reinforced doors. The crowd outside had transformed from protesters to something else, something more dangerous. Marcus felt Reeves's hand on his shoulder. We need to move you. There's a secure evidence room in the basement. It's reinforced, limited access, and... I'm not hiding, Marcus interrupted. His voice surprised him, steady, clear, nothing like the terrified teenager he felt like inside. If I hide, if I run, Mallory wins. Everyone will believe his story. Marcus, this isn't about winning or losing, Chen started. Yes, it is. Marcus stood, his hands clenched into fists. That's exactly what this is about. He's betting that I'll disappear, that the feds will protect me by making me invisible, and that without me visible and present, the doubt he's planting will grow. He looked at Morrison. You need to let me make a statement. Absolutely not, Morrison said. You're a minor and a protected witness. We're not parading you in front of... Not to the crowd, Marcus interrupted. To the officers, the ones in this building, the ones who aren't corrupt, who have been watching all this unfold. He could feel the idea crystallizing, could feel the rightness of it. Mallory's trying to isolate me, make me seem like a phantom, a conspiracy. But I'm real. I'm here. And there are officers in this building who know the truth, who have been too afraid to speak up. Let me talk to them. The adults exchanged looks. It's insane, Reeves said, but also he looked at Morrison. It might work. The good cops, the ones who have kept their heads down, they need to see that standing up is possible. They need a catalyst. Chen shook his head. You're talking about putting a 17-year-old in front of potentially hostile law enforcement while there's a riot forming outside. That's not protection, that's sacrifice. Then protect me by letting me speak, Marcus insisted. His grandfather's words echoed in his mind, words from a sermon about the Birmingham jail, about standing in truth even when truth was dangerous. You brought me into this. You asked me to be brave enough to testify. Well, I'm asking you to be brave enough to let me. The door burst open and Captain Richard Bradley entered, a black man in his 50s with gray at his temples and eyes that had seen every type of violence the job offered. He looked at Morrison. We've regained control of the PA system. Mallory's barricade is holding, but we have tactical teams in position. He turned to Marcus. I've been briefed on your situation, son, and I need you to know something. I've been on this force for 27 years. I've watched good officers quit because they were tired of the corruption. I've watched bad officers get promoted because they played the game. When the DOJ came to me 2 years ago and asked for my cooperation, I said yes because I was tired of being ashamed of the badge I wear. He moved closer to Marcus, and there was something in his expression, respect, maybe, or recognition. Officer Derek Mallory is a stain on this department, Bradley continued. But he's not the only one. There are 14 officers under federal indictment, but there are at least twice that many who have looked the other way, who have covered for their brothers in blue, who have valued loyalty over justice. And you, he pointed at Marcus, you're the kid who said enough. So if you want to speak, if you think you can reach the officers who are still on the fence, still deciding if they want to be part of the solution or part of the problem, then I'll give you that platform. Morrison looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Bradley's eyes stopped her. 5 minutes, she said finally, heavily supervised. First sign of threat, we extract him. Agreed. Agreed, Bradley said. They moved through corridors bathed in red emergency lighting, past officers who stared at Marcus with expressions ranging from curiosity to hostility to something that might have been hope. The station's main briefing room was on the first floor, a space normally used for shift changes and departmental meetings. When Marcus entered, he found it packed with at least 50 officers, some in uniform, some in plain clothes, all of them watching him with wary eyes. Bradley took position at the front. Listen up. This young man has something to say, and you're all going to hear him out. After he's done, you'll have choices to make. But those choices start with listening. Marcus stepped forward. His hands were shaking, so he clasped them together. He thought of his grandfather in that Birmingham jail. He thought of his father, dead too young from stress and a system that didn't care. He thought of Aaliyah Richardson, crying in her car over a fake broken tail light. He thought of everyone who'd been here before him, everyone who'd been brave when being brave seemed impossible. 6 months ago, he began, his voice quiet but clear. I was walking home from work when I witnessed 2 police officers assault an unarmed man. The man's name was David Martinez. He was 32 years old. He was a teacher. He had autism, and sometimes when he was stressed, he would rock back and forth and make humming sounds. The officers thought he was on drugs. They thought he was resisting. They didn't listen when he tried to explain. They didn't care that he was terrified. The room was silent. I filmed what happened to David Martinez. I filmed them tasing him repeatedly. I filmed them laughing about it afterward. I filmed one officer say, "That's how you handle the animals." And when I brought that footage to the police, when I sat across from Detective Sarah Martinez and showed her what I'd seen, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd signed my death warrant. He could see some officers shifting uncomfortably. But Detective Martinez did something extraordinary. She believed me. She looked at that footage, and instead of circling the wagons, instead of protecting bad cops, she called the FBI. She called the DOJ. She started the investigation that brought all of you here tonight. And you know what she told me? She said, "There are more good cops than bad cops, but the good ones need to start being louder than the bad ones." Marcus looked around the room. "So I'm asking you, are you good cops? Because if you are, now's the time to prove it. Officer Mallory is in that locker room right now telling lies about me. He's claiming I manufactured evidence, that I'm part of some conspiracy. And he's doing it because he knows that if you all believe him, if you all close ranks around him, then the truth doesn't matter anymore." A younger officer, couldn't have been more than 25, raised his hand tentatively. "Why should we believe you? How do we know you're not lying?" "Because I have nothing to gain from lying," Marcus said simply. "I'm 17 years old. I want to go to college. I want to live a normal life. I didn't ask to be here. I didn't want to be the person who starts a federal investigation. But I saw something wrong and I couldn't look away. Can you say the same?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Before anyone could answer, Detective Sarah Martinez entered the room, and the energy shifted immediately. She was in plain clothes, jeans, and a FBI windbreaker, and her eyes were red like she'd been crying. Behind her was a man Marcus didn't recognize, but whose resemblance to David Martinez was unmistakable. David's brother. And in Sarah's hands was a laptop, its screen showing something that made her jaw tight with rage. "I need everyone to see this," she announced, her voice shaking with barely controlled emotion. "Because what Marcus just described, we have the full unedited footage, and we also have something else, Officer Mallory's body camera from that night, which he claimed malfunctioned. But it didn't malfunction, he just thought he'd deleted it." As the footage began to play on the large screen at the front of the room, even Marcus felt his stomach turn, because the reality was so much worse than even he'd remembered. The footage played in absolute silence. 50 police officers watched as their colleague, their brother in blue, as the union liked to call them, committed act after act of brutality against a defenseless man who kept crying, kept begging, kept trying to explain that he couldn't help the way he was rocking, couldn't control the humming that helped him cope with stress. David Martinez's brother, his name was Carlos, Marcus would learn later, stood rigid beside Detective Martinez, his fists clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white. He'd seen this footage before. He'd lived with it. But watching it again, watching these officers see it for the first time, Marcus couldn't imagine the strength it took. The body camera footage was devastating. It captured audio that Marcus's phone from across the parking lot hadn't picked up. Officer Mallory saying, "You like acting like an animal? We'll treat you like one." Another officer, Marcus recognized him from the federal documents as Officer Raymond Torres, badge 892, laughing and saying, $10 says he pisses himself before we're done." Several officers in the briefing room stood up and walked out. Not in solidarity with Mallory, Marcus could see it in their body language, but because they couldn't watch anymore. Couldn't bear to see the badge reduced to this. When the footage ended, Detective Martinez's voice cut through the stunned silence. David Martinez spent 3 days in the hospital. He lost his teaching job because the trauma triggered such severe anxiety he couldn't return to the classroom. His family paid over $50,000 in medical bills, and when they tried to file a complaint, they were told there was no evidence of wrongdoing, that it was David's word against the officers. That cases like this happen sometimes, and everybody just needs to move on. She looked around the room, making eye contact with as many officers as she could. But Marcus Webb didn't move on. This 17-year-old kid who had every reason to keep his head down, to not get involved, to protect himself. He came forward. He gave us evidence we never would have had otherwise, and because of him, we have a chance to clean house. We have a chance to prove that this badge means something beyond protecting our own. Captain Bradley stepped forward. Here's what's happening right now. Federal agents have arrest warrants for 14 officers. Officer Mallory and 3 others are barricaded in the locker room, but they're not getting out of this building without being taken into custody. The question for the rest of you is simple. Are you going to stand with them, or are you going to stand with justice? A veteran officer Marcus didn't recognize stood up slowly. His name plate read SGT, WLLIMS. I've been on this force 19 years, he said, his voice gravelly. I've looked the other way too many times. I've told myself it's not my problem, that getting involved means ending my career, means losing my pension, means painting a target on my back. He looked at Marcus. But this kid, he's got more courage in his little finger than I've had in 19 years. So I'm saying it now, on record in front of everyone. I've witnessed misconduct. I've witnessed brutality. I've witnessed officers planting evidence, lying in reports, covering for each other. And I'm willing to testify. The room erupted. Some officers shouted support. Some cursed Williams. Some sat in stunned silence, processing what his confession meant. Morrison keyed her radio. This is Special Agent Morrison. Sergeant Williams just made a voluntary statement offering testimony. I need that recorded officially, and I need protection details assigned to him immediately. 2 more officers stood, then 5, then a dozen. Each one offering testimony, offering evidence, offering to finally break the code of silence that had protected corrupt cops for decades. Mallory's voice came through the PA system again, but this time it was desperate, cracking. Don't listen to them. They're all part of it. The feds have gotten to them, threatened them, forced them to. The PA cut out mid-sentence. Bradley looked at his communications officer, who gave a thumbs up. We've isolated the locker room systems. He shut down. Agent Reeves was coordinating with tactical teams, his radio chatter a constant stream of updates. Barricade is holding, but we have entry points. Recommend tear gas deployment in 5 minutes if they don't surrender voluntarily. Morrison shook her head, negative on the tear gas. We do this clean, no excuse for them to claim brutality. She looked at Marcus. You up for one more act of courage? What do you need? Talk to them, Mallory and the others. Convince them to come out peacefully. Marcus felt every eye in the room turn toward him. The suggestion was insane. Why would they listen to him? Why would corrupt cops barricaded in a locker room with weapons care what a 17-year-old had to say? But then Carlos Martinez stepped forward. I'll go with him. David's brother looked haunted but determined. They need to see us. The people they hurt. They need to see that we're real, not just case numbers or statistics. Morrison looked like she wanted to refuse, but Captain Bradley nodded slowly. Tactical teams escort them. Full protective gear. First sign of weapon deployment, extraction protocols immediately. They assembled in the hallway outside the locker room. Marcus, Carlos, Morrison, Reeves, Bradley, and 4 tactical officers in full gear. The door was reinforced metal, locked from the inside. Through the small window, Marcus could see barricades made from lockers and benches. Reeves knocked on the door. Officer Mallory. This is Agent Reeves, FBI. We need to talk. Silence. Reeves tried again. Derek, you're only making this worse. You're looking at federal charges right now, but if you harm anyone, if you discharge those weapons, you're looking at life in prison. More silence. Then faintly Mallory's voice. Send everyone away. Just the kid, just Marcus Webb. He wants to be a hero so bad, let him come in here and tell us to our faces why we should destroy our lives for his 15 minutes of fame. Carlos grabbed Marcus's arm. Don't, it's a trap. But Marcus was already thinking about it, already calculating. If Mallory wanted a confrontation, wanted a chance to tell his side, wanted to justify or excuse or rationalize, maybe that was an opening. Maybe that was the crack in the armor. I'll do it, Marcus said. Absolutely not, Morrison snapped. That's not negotiable. Then we wait them out, Bradley said. We have time. They don't. Buildings secure, crowds being pushed back by riot police, and those arrest warrants are valid for the next 72 hours. But Marcus remembered something his grandfather had preached about sitting across from the people who hated you, who wanted to hurt you, and talking to them anyway. About how change didn't happen when you stayed separated and entrenched. It happened when you forced confrontation, when you made people see your humanity even when they didn't want to. Marcus made his decision. Before anyone could stop him, he walked up to the locker room door, knocked clearly, and spoke loud enough for Mallory to hear. You want to talk? Fine, but not just me. Carlos Martinez comes too, David's brother, the man whose brother you tortured. You want to tell me I'm lying? Tell him too. The silence that followed lasted an eternity. Then the sound of locks disengaging. The door opened a crack, revealing Mallory's face, pale, sweating, desperate. And behind him, in the shadows of the barricaded room, 3 other officers who knew their careers were over. But what happened in the next 10 minutes would determine whether they faced justice with dignity or went down fighting in a way that would destroy them completely. The locker room smelled like fear and old sweat, and the particular staleness of spaces where men kept their secrets. Marcus stepped inside with Carlos beside him, fully aware that Morrison and the tactical team were stationed right outside the door, fully aware that this could go wrong in a dozen different ways. Officer Mallory stood in the center of the makeshift barricade, his uniform rumpled, his service weapon still holstered but his hand hovering near it in a way that made every nerve in Marcus's body scream danger. The 3 other officers, Torres, Jennings, and Kowalski's nephew Mark Kowalski, looked exhausted, defeated, like men who'd run out of options and were now just waiting for the inevitable. You came, Mallory said, and Marcus couldn't tell if it was surprise or mockery in his voice. You asked me to, Marcus replied evenly, so I'm here, talk. Mallory laughed, but it was a hollow sound. You think you're brave? You think coming in here makes you some kind of hero? I don't think I'm a hero, Marcus said. I think I'm a witness who told the truth. That's all. Carlos Martinez stepped forward, and Marcus saw all 4 officers tense. My brother almost died, Carlos said, his voice trembling with controlled rage. You tased him 17 times. You laughed while you did it. You called him an animal. And when he was lying on that pavement, having a seizure from the repeated shocks, you stood over him and you joked about it. Torres looked away. Jennings had tears running down his face. That footage is edited, Mallory insisted, but the fire had gone out of his conviction. The kids people manipulated. Stop, Officer Mark Kowalski said suddenly. Just stop, Derek. Everyone's seen the body camera footage. Your body camera, the one you reported as malfunctioned. There's no editing. There's no manipulation. We did what they're accusing us of. Shut up, Mark, Mallory snapped. No, Mark continued, his voice stronger now. I'm done. I'm done lying, I'm done covering, I'm done pretending that what we did was acceptable because everybody else does it too. He looked at Marcus and Carlos. I'm sorry. It doesn't fix anything, it doesn't undo the damage, but I'm sorry. Marcus felt something shift in the room. It was like watching a dam begin to crack, small fissures at first, but spreading, until the whole structure was compromised. Jennings spoke next, his voice barely above a whisper. I joined this force because my dad was a cop. My grandfather was a cop. I thought I was joining something honorable. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about protecting people and started being about protecting each other. And I went along with it because I was too afraid to stand alone. Torres remained silent, his jaw clenched. Mallory looked around at his fellow officers, his brothers, and Marcus watched the realization hit him. He was alone. Even here, even now, the code of silence was breaking. This is what they do, Mallory said, but the conviction was gone. They turn you against each other. They make you think you're the bad guy for doing your job, for dealing with the scum of the earth who. Carlos Martinez moved so fast that Marcus barely registered it. One moment he was standing beside Marcus, the next he was inches from Mallory's face. My brother is a teacher. He's a man who spends his days helping kids learn to read. He's someone who volunteers at a soup kitchen every Sunday. He's got autism and sometimes he rocks and hums when he's stressed, and that's not a crime. That's not being scum. That's being human. And you almost killed him because you couldn't be bothered to see him as human. Mallory's hand moved toward his weapon, and everything happened at once. The door burst open, tactical officers flooded in. Marcus felt someone, Reeves, grab him and Carlos, pulling them back, and voices were shouting commands. Hands up now. Mallory froze, his hand halfway to his holster. For a long moment, Marcus thought he might do it anyway, might draw and force a confrontation that could only end one way. But then his shoulders sagged, his hand dropped, and he raised both hands above his head. It's over, Morrison's voice cut through the chaos. Derek Mallory, Raymond Torres, Christopher Jennings, Mark Kowalski, you're all under arrest for federal civil rights violations. You have the right to remain silent. Marcus watched as they were cuffed, as they were read their rights, as they were led out of the locker room one by one. Mark Kowalski was crying. Jennings kept whispering apologies. Torres stared straight ahead, stone-faced. And Mallory looked at Marcus one last time, and there was something in his eyes that might have been understanding or might have been hatred. Maybe both. The hallway outside had filled with officers, the ones who'd testified, the ones who were still deciding, the ones who knew that everything had just changed. They formed a silent corridor as the arrested officers were walked through, and Marcus saw faces that showed shame and relief and fear in equal measure. Captain Bradley put his hand on Marcus's shoulder as they watched the procession. You did good, son. You did real good. But Marcus didn't feel triumphant. He felt exhausted and hollow and old beyond his years. He'd done what needed doing, but the cost, the weight of it, was something he'd carry forever. Morrison approached, her expression softer than Marcus had ever seen it. Your mother's here. She's been trying to get through the crowd for the last hour, but we've finally got her inside. She's in the captain's office. She turned to Carlos. Mr. Martinez, we'll need your statement, but it can wait until tomorrow. Go home, be with your brother, tell him this matters, tell him what he went through matters. Carlos nodded, unable to speak. As Marcus walked toward the captain's office, toward his mother, toward whatever came next, he passed by Sergeant Williams, the veteran officer who'd been first to break the silence. Williams nodded at him, a gesture of respect between people who understood what it meant to stand up when standing up cost everything. Marcus opened the door to Bradley's office and saw his mother, Patricia Webb, her face streaked with tears, her hands shaking as she reached for him. But she wasn't alone. Sitting beside her was Marcus's grandfather, Reverend William Webb, still wearing his clerical collar, his eyes wet but blazing with pride. And behind them, standing against the wall with a laptop open, was someone Marcus hadn't expected to see, David Martinez himself, alive and present, and looking at Marcus with an expression that held more gratitude than words could contain. As the door closed behind him, shutting out the chaos of the station, Marcus heard his grandfather's voice, strong and steady despite the emotion. Tell us everything, son. Tell us how you changed the world tonight. Marcus's mother held him for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Her grip was fierce, desperate, the kind of hold that came from a parent who'd spent the night imagining worst-case scenarios. When she finally pulled back, her hands moved over him like she was checking for injuries, for proof that he was really okay. Baby, she whispered, her voice breaking. They told me you were safe, but I couldn't. I needed to see you. I'm okay, Mom, Marcus said, and realized it was true. He was okay. Shaken, exhausted, permanently changed, but okay. Reverend Webb stood up slowly, his 73-year-old frame still commanding despite his age. He pulled Marcus into an embrace that smelled like peppermint and old books and Sunday mornings. Your father would be so proud, he said quietly. So proud. David Martinez stepped forward tentatively. His hands were shaking slightly. A tremor that Carlos had mentioned was permanent now, damage from the repeated tasings. but his eyes were clear and his voice was steady. "Thank you," he said simply. "Thank you for not looking away." Marcus felt tears threaten for the first time all night. "I'm sorry it happened to you. I'm sorry I couldn't stop it from happening." David shook his head. "You stopped it from happening to the next person. And the next, and the next, that's what matters." Through the office window, Marcus could see the station slowly returning to some semblance of order. The crowd outside was dispersing. The media was being corralled into a designated area for a formal press conference, and officers were either processing the arrests or processing their own complicity in a system that had protected abusers for too long. Agent Morrison entered without knocking, followed by Assistant U.S. Attorney Chen. Both looked like they'd aged years in the last few hours. "We've got all 14 in custody," Morrison announced. The arrests went smoothly once Mallory surrendered. "No injuries, no incidents," she looked at Marcus. "And we've had 6 more officers come forward with testimony in the last hour. The dam broke. What you started 6 months ago, what you finished tonight, it's going to reshape this entire department." Chen sat down heavily. "Marcus, we need to talk about next steps. The trial is going to be high profile, national media attention. Defense attorneys will try to discredit you, intimidate you, make this as difficult as possible." "I know," Marcus said. He'd known this moment was coming since the day he'd walked into that police station with his mother and his video. "I'm ready." "You say that now," Chen cautioned. "But it's going to be months of depositions, testimony, cross-examination. Your life is going to be under a microscope. Everything you've ever said, every friend you've ever had, every mistake you've ever made, it's all going to be weaponized against you." "Then they'll find out I'm just a kid who did the right thing," Marcus said. "I can live with that." Reverend Webb smiled. "That's my grandson, raised right." Morrison's phone buzzed. She checked it and her eyebrows rose. "The mayor wants to make a statement, wants to commend you personally." She looked at Marcus. "You up for that?" Patricia Webb cut in before Marcus could answer. "My son is 17 years old and he's been through a traumatic experience tonight. Whatever statements need making, whatever commendations need giving, they can wait until he's had a chance to rest." Morrison nodded. "Fair enough. But Marcus," she looked at him seriously, "you need to understand that you're a symbol now. Whether you want to be or not, you represent something to people. Hope, justice, the possibility of change, that's a heavy burden." "I'll manage," Marcus said. They spent another hour in that office, going over logistics and next steps. Agent Reeves would remain Marcus's primary contact. They'd coordinate his testimony schedule around his school obligations. There would be security measures, not quite witness protection, but increased awareness, monitoring, someone to call if anything felt wrong. When they finally left the station, it was past midnight. The crowd had dwindled to a few dozen people, mostly community members who'd been there from the beginning. When they saw Marcus emerge with his mother and grandfather, a spontaneous applause broke out. It was strange and uncomfortable and moving all at once. Mrs. Chen was there, still clutching Marcus's phone like a sacred trust. She pressed it into his hands. "You keep fighting," she said. "You keep being brave." Marcus nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. The drive home was quiet. Patricia Webb held Marcus's hand the entire way, her grip never loosening. Reverend Webb drove carefully through streets that felt both familiar and strange now, like Marcus had left as one person and returned as another. When they pulled up to the house, Marcus saw lights on in every window. His little sister Imani burst out the front door the moment the car stopped, running toward him with tears streaming down her face. She wrapped her arms around his waist and held on. "I saw it on the news," she sobbed. "I saw them arrest you and I thought. "I know," Marcus said, holding her. "I'm sorry I scared you." Inside, the house was full of people. Neighbors, church members, family friends, everyone who'd heard what happened and needed to see for themselves that Marcus was safe. There was food covering every surface in the kitchen, enough to feed an army. This was how the community responded to trauma, with presence, with food, with the refusal to let anyone face the aftermath alone. Jamal was there, his eyes red. "Bro," he said, pulling Marcus into a hug, "you're on every news channel, you're trending on Twitter, he laughed shakily, "you're kind of famous." I don't want to be famous, Marcus said. I just want things to be fair. Destiny was sitting on the couch, and when she saw Marcus, she stood up slowly. They'd been dating for 8 months, and he'd kept so many secrets from her. He'd hated himself for it, but now she knew everything. Her expression was complicated, hurt and proud and scared all mixed together. You could have told me, she said quietly. I would have understood. I know, Marcus said. I'm sorry. She crossed the distance between them and took his hands. I'm not mad. She looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time. You're so much braver than I ever knew. The rest of the night passed in a blur. People talking, phone ringing constantly, news playing on the TV showing footage of the arrests. At some point, Marcus's mother ushered him upstairs, away from the crowd, into the sanctuary of his bedroom. Get some sleep, she said, kissing his forehead like he was still a little kid. Tomorrow we'll figure out everything else. But sleep was impossible. Marcus lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the night. The arrest, the station, the confrontation, the surrender, the aftermath. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. He almost deleted it, but something made him open it. It was from Sergeant Williams, the officer who'd been first to break the silence. The message was simple. Thank you for giving me my honor back. Marcus stared at those words for a long time. Then he typed a response. Thank you for choosing honor. As dawn began to break outside his window, Marcus finally felt himself relaxing. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by exhaustion so profound it felt like gravity. But underneath that exhaustion was something else, something that felt like peace. He'd done it, he'd stood up, he'd spoken truth. And while the fight wasn't over, the trial still loomed, the testimony still waited, the consequences still had to play out. Tonight had proven something essential. Justice was possible. Change was possible. One person, one witness, one act of courage could crack open a system that had seemed impenetrable. Marcus closed his eyes and finally slept. Where are you from? Tell us in the comments below. And if you're loving this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more.